Today we're going to cover rust repairing rocker panels on this 2008 Volkswagen GTI. We've got the fenders and everything off of this to gain access to the front of the rocker. What ends up happening is sand and leaves and stuff collect in this pocket here, and then moisture gets in there and it has a tendency to rust them out. So we're going to kind of go through the steps involved to basically make new panels to replace all of this. Yeah, further review, this whole thing was all full of sand and everything once we removed the plastic fender liners and everything. And there's vinyl spray here. You can see that it's pretty much all worn, all rusted out. There's supposed to be a tab here that the lower side skirt attaches to. So the first thing we're going to do is kind of vacuum it all out and clean everything up first with just soap and water. And I'm going to take a measurement from here about 12 inches back, so once we start cutting this all out we'll have a reference on the, where this face of the rocker panel should actually be. Okay, I cleaned everything out, got a line marked here, and now what we're going to do is just start kind of, for the most part, the rocker shuts, the vinyl spray is kind of the only thing holding it together. So by hand we'll pull off what we can, and then I'll just start grinding back until we get fresh metal. But this is, as you can see, this is the state of where we're at. This inside's pretty good. I've already scraped out some of the caulking that kind of holds these together, and we'll just kind of work it back until we get into some clean metal. There's two things I like to use. I like to use a bench grinder with a carbide bit. It's easy to get in the spot. And then I also like to use just a pneumatic grinder. So that's what we're going to do. We're just going to grind until we get some fresh stuff and go from there. Yeah, I like to take a gasket scraper and kind of get all of the rocker shuts, the body shuts off of there. And it's really thick on here, so I'll get as much off as I can and I'll grind it. And you can kind of see where the actual patch is going to need to go. But we're actually down in the clean metal here, which is really good. So we'll work back here, grind this all out now so we're down to clean metal, and then we'll determine what we need to do for a patch. Okay, as you can see we've got clean metal back here, so this is kind of where our patch panel will go. And once we get a patch panel made, then we'll cut it out so we got a butt splice. We got to still do a little bit more work in here. This is a little bit more tender than I expected, so we got to probably try to make a part or reinforce this. And then if you look down underneath, we've got all nice clean metal here now. The biggest thing with this vinyl spray is once moisture gets under it, it kind of traps it. So any place where it was loose, we basically brought it back to here where it's nice and it's fastened really well, so that way moisture can't get under it. But what we'll do is the panel will kind of come in under here, come in here, and across here is where we'll actually kind of tack weld it here, where we get some really nice metal. But you know, one of the things that the reason why these rust out is this all fills full of debris. And you've got one panel here, this little bracket, you got this panel, you got the rocker panel, and they all come here, and they fill it with seam sealer and everything, and then it just kind of traps the material, and you've got the situation that we see here. So next what we're going to do is we're going to start making some templates, and we'll start making some panels. Alright, the first thing we're going to do is trace out this piece here. Ultimately, my goal is to try to get an inside profile of this piece, but I'm going to start from the outside, and that should make it a little bit easier to do what we need to do. And I'm just going to kind of come like so, trace this like that, and then I'm going to cut that, and I'll just keep cutting it until it fits inside of that region right there. Okay, so if you look at this here, we kind of got that all lined up in there. So this is actually our face, and then we're going to be bending a piece up on the top, and then we're going to be bending this all here. Okay, one thing that we can do is we can go on the other side. It's not quite as rusty, and we can just verify this because it should be the mirror image of this. So that's what we'll do next, is we'll just go over there to compare it. Okay, it's a little bit tougher to see because there's this part of the rocker panel that we're going to need to make a template for too, because that's all rotted out on that side. But if you come in here, you can see like this angles away a little bit. So we made sure that we put that into our pattern too. So if you actually put that in there, you can see that it fits in there really good. And so that's kind of what that face is going to look like on that bracket. We're going to bend some metal this way, and then we're going to bend the contour this way, and that'll be the new reinforcement on the other side. Okay, so we made a pattern for this now. This is pretty much what that face of the rocker panel looks like. So that's actually done, and it goes on to there like so. So this we'll use on both sides, and you can see just playing with it. This is really needs to be replaced too. It's falling apart, but it was a great pattern. The next thing we're going to do is take a contour gauge and take a contour of the rocker panel and use that to start making a pattern for the actual outside of the rocker panel. We'll do it on the other side because we've got it all ground down and everything, so we're not going to have the influence of the rocker shuts, you know, the vinyl spray, and it's in the way. Okay, you see I've got my contour gauge now. It's not big enough to get the whole thing up on the top of the rocker, but at least I can get the rest of this, and then we can just basically extrapolate it further out and go from there. But this will definitely give us a start on what we need to do for the contour, and then up into the flat onto the lower part of the rocker panel. Okay, so now we got the contour gauge all for the face of the rocker panel. You know, we got the little bit sticking in there, coming right around. Then we're going to need to do a radius up on the top. But that's actually the profile that we're going to need to make. Okay, so this is the final shape that we're going to need to do. But the issue that we're going to have is, in order to bend this contour, we'll have to bend this later on, right? So what I need to do is make a profile that basically keeps coming out, and keeps extending out, and then ultimately we'll bend that out. So I'll make another template, and that just basically extends this out flat, that to give us some material that we can actually bend up and then bend across later on. Okay, so one thing I forgot to mention is for this contour template I made it out of foam core. What's nice about that is you can actually sand it a little bit if you got some high spots. And so this is our final shape, and then this is what we're actually going to form to. This is going to be our contour, and then at these two spots there's just going to be a little bit extra and extra this way that we can trim and fold into the transition, and this extra will be able to bend up here and here. But when we try to bend this, you really can't do that. You got to get this first, and then we can bend those two up. Okay, so now that we've got all of our templates made, you know, we've got a template here that shows you, you know, the face of this bracket. And what we'll do is we'll use a Hammerform to actually make this bracket, and we'll go through the steps involved. And we've got the final shape of what the rocker panel looks like. And what we've done is we extrapolate it out with this piece too, because when we start to form that contour, we're going to have to bend this later on. So this is kind of what the contour needs to look like before we, you know, when we actually put the radius into it. So it'll make sense once we start doing this. And then of course on the end of the rocker panel there is this part, which is the flange, and we gathered that from the other side. So we pretty much have all of our contour templates done now. So what we'll do is we'll concentrate on the steps involved to hammer form this bracket. Alright, like we said before, that to make these brackets, we're gonna use a hammer flange process. And what it is you kind of take a piece of sheet metal, sandwich it between two blocks of material, and then you'll just hammer it. So you'll actually be forming the flanges. Now, you know, the pattern we have is contoured. So what we'll need to do is actually trace that onto here and get the contour of what those flanges need to look like. And then what we'll do is we'll put a hole between it, and we'll kind of sandwich it together. And you know, what's nice about this is the part actually has a hole into it for a plug to get in there to basically undercoat or do whatever you need to do within the cavity of the rocker. So, you know, once we get that made, we'll make a piece of sheet metal, we'll sandwich it between these, and hammer form the flanges. So the first thing I'm going to need to do is take the two blocks and mark the center where the hole is, and we're going to drill a hole through these so we can actually kind of clamp them together. And I'm going to mark the contour here, and then we're going to just I'm going to use a jigsaw to rough cut this, and then probably some files and a sanding block to actually get that contour. So that's my next step, and when that's done, we'll go back and we'll start to hammer flange one of these parts. Now what's nice about this is with two blocks, you know, we'll be able to hammer the flange downwards for one side, and then we'll be able to come upwards for the other side. So we'll be able to make the mirror image of this part, which you need for the left and right hand side of the car. Alright, so now that we've got the layout under the blocks, what the contour is going to be, we'll center punch this and drill a hole to put a bolt through there. And we'll jigsaw this out and then sand it to the line for both of these. Okay, just a little progress report onto our blocks. I drilled a hole through them, so these two are pretty much side by side. And I've got the contour all roughed out now. So now what we're just going to do is finish sand it to our line. You know, I've got a little bit wide of the line, and now we're just going to finish sand these together simultaneously. What I'll probably do is I drill a 1/2-inch hole through here and take a bolt with some washers and kind of clamp them both together so they're flush to each other, and then we'll just finish this contour. Okay, so we've got our block now, and we actually, you can see the white line faintly. We actually have the contour of what we had of what that part's going to need to look like. And so what we're going to need to do is put a little bit of radius here. And the thing is, if you look at the bracket, there's actually a radius inside of here. So I'm going to take my radius tools, and I checked already. And I'm going to say it's about a 3/32 radius. So what we're going to need to do is, into the center of the block where we're actually going to start hammer forming these, we're going to put a radius on there. So what I'm going to do is this block, you know, kind of goes like this, that we're going to be forming on. So I will radius this part here, so when we fold the tabs over, it'll start to form the radius. So I'm going to do that now, and then at that point we should be able to start kind of hammer forming these brackets. Alright, so now we've got the radius put onto this Hammerform die, and now what we're just going to do is put some steel blue onto some sheet metal, scribe this profile, and then determine our extra that we need to leave for the flanges, and then we'll cut it out, and then we'll start prepping it into the Hammerform die. It's going to be a little hard to see, but what we did is we actually traced the profile here, right? And we got to punch a hole here so when we clamp it together we can put the bolt through. And one flange is like 1.5 inches, so from this surface the flange is going to be 1.5 inches, so we left plenty of material there. And the other flange is like 1 inch, so we just kind of expanded it. And this is actually our cut line. And then we're going to need to kind of slit it here so we can bend that one over and then fold it over here. So now what we'll do is we'll just cut this out with some tin snips, or I got some electric shears, and we'll take care of that. Alright, so now we've got it laid out, and the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to rough cut it, and then we'll finish cut it with the nibbler. Okay, now we'll just finish cut it a little bit. We're going to need to kind of make a cut here so when we do the two folds, so we'll do that now. so now next thing we'll do is we'll use this Roper Whitney punch to actually punch the hole into the center. We'll line it up. Looks good right there. We'll start the punch. Usually what you do is you just kind of move the die up a little bit so you're able to get a good squeeze. There we go. So there's our panel rough cut. And now what we're going to do is put it inside of our fixture. Alright, so now we've got our piece that we're going to hammer form into our blocks. We make sure that the radius is on the side that we're going to bend. So the radius is here, so we're going to fold them over this way. So now what we're going to do is just kind of set this into our vise, and then we're just going to start knocking these over. Okay, and we can kind of go like this too. We don't need to keep it in the vise, but you just start working it over. And of course there is a contour, so we are going to get a little bit of bunching, and we're going to need to kind of take care of that. But just keep slowly working it. In the vise if needed. So I'm going to need to trim this here to get this fold to come over, and I'm probably going to need to work this a little bit more, but maybe even put a little notch into it or something. So I'm going to do that, and then we'll come back to it. Okay, so we've notched it a little bit, and now we can kind of keep folding it, you know. You know, this one's a very drastic form, and there's such of a wide lip on it that what we might need to do is, you know, tack weld some places together to allow enough to relieve. But yeah, there's a lot of material here, so I might need to cut some of that out to get it to go. But we'll give it a whirl and keep going. Okay, so we formed it around some more, and now we're just going to need to kind of cut the material a little bit more. I'm going to need to do another cut here get rid of some of this material and fold it over. So we just keep progressing like that. Okay, so now that I get it rough formed, what I'm going to need to do is take it out of this hammer form and do a pie cut here, do a cut across and a cut across here, and then probably a little cut here for some relief, and then I should be able to bring it down the rest of the way. But if you look here, you can see a really nice transition, you know, where it's formed up. If you look from the end, this is what the bracket's going to start to look like, and it's looking pretty good. Okay, so now we basically cut it across, and I reinstalled it into the fixture, and we just kind of keep hammering it and working it and see what we come up with. Bringing it around. Got this here. Alright, so now probably what makes sense is we should probably trim this excess material back, and then I'll be able to hammer it a little bit more. But we definitely have the shape, you know. I'll work it a little bit more, and what I'll probably do is just tack weld across here and here, and then we'll kind of blend it all in. But that kind of gives you an idea of what we're doing, and I'll show you the finished part when we're all done. Okay, so if you look at this now, I trimmed it to the proper lengths I need to be, and you can see the contour. I pretty much got it, you know. I'll squeeze a little bit here and put a tack weld along there, and I'll squeeze and put a tack weld around there and just blend it all in. But that's pretty much the part. We'll take it out of the thing so you can see it. But if you look, you know, it's a really nice bracket. You know, we'll take care of it a little bit with a dolly and everything once it's out to smooth it up a little bit. I got a little bit here where it didn't quite follow the radius because there was too much material, but I'll be able to blend that in. But that's it, you know. It's a good way to make something, you know, it's got a contour instead of a bunch of pieces. You can kind of make it all out of one piece. You know, it would have been nice to be able to buy this bracket, but it's no longer available. So we'll get this welded up and ready to install onto the car. And the next thing we'll do is start working on the actual outer skin and how we're actually going to make that. Okay.